Good morning. Hey, real quick, before we start, I know that you guys will understand what I'm saying. Usually when it's like, hold on, Powell Butte, we have to say something to you online. Online, we're going to do the opposite. You sit there. I got to talk to the Powell Butte people for just a second. I said last week COVID was over, and I stand by that. That doesn't mean people aren't still getting it. To be clear, it means that as a country, we're starting to move back into a sense of wanting to be okay and getting back to our patterns and habits. And so I know that you know this, but for you guys that may not, I felt a huge responsibility with this church to help keep things moving for places where churches were shut down. I mean, I know a lot of churches struggled with the shutdown and how to stay open and what does that mean. And we had this explosion of growth online. But at the same time, I want you guys to know and hear it from me. Powell Butte kind of had to push the pause button. I mean, we pushed pause in this building for about the last year because we felt like there was such a national responsibility. We were hearing from people whose churches were closed and they were just checking in on a Sunday or they would watch during the week. And so if you would say, and don't applaud for this, but just it's one of those like moments. If you would say like, hey, okay, half of you people are going to understand what I'm going to say. Half of you won't. Anybody ever watch the show Cheers? You walked in and you felt like everybody knew your name, right? It's part of the song. Like you felt like it was just like a home base and there was this community and you felt like that you knew everybody and everybody knew you. And we have gotten away from that for about the last year, not because we were going to abandon it forever, but because at the moment, if you have been watching the news, the world was trying to fall apart and we were participating in that process of trying to keep things going. Just know this, we are now coming back to the middle a little bit. Our conversations, our focus, the things that we're really paying attention to. You hear about the online launch that's happening on July 11th, shameless plug. But at the exact same time, what's going on behind the scenes is we're trying to redevelop the community and the culture that we feel like we had to almost push pause on here for a little while. And so if it feels like we're just here for the online campus, I know that's been true. And we felt like it was important. And I want to tell you, thank you for the participation that we've seen from you guys for about the last year. Selfless participation. I'm assuming that at homes, if you're watching from home, you're applauding people here who have kind of had to just sit and participate and question, like, where is this going? It's on its way back. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for playing along on that while we're trying to figure it out. We're in the middle of a series. I think not. Don't get too excited, but this whole series has been preached live. The whole thing. Not one of these has been pre-recorded, and I have enjoyed it. Selfishly, it's been nice. I know that we're going to have to kind of get back into the swing of things. I've enjoyed preaching it live. Thank you for everybody who has not called and asked. Is it live this week? Again, it's just where we are. I mean, nobody loves preaching to an empty room, and I'm not going to go too far on that one. Thank you, guys. Here's the point of the series. The point of the series is that your thinking will shape your life, and that is completely countercultural. Because culture says, and society says, that your life will shape how you think. You're a victim. It's this accepted thing that, well, poverty causes crime. Anybody ever heard that? The highest cause of crime is poverty. Well, just because the correlation and causation, there's this conversation that says, wait a minute, maybe. But maybe the way that we choose to think shapes the way that we live and shapes the decisions that we make. And maybe we live in a society that says, well, if you are in poverty, you have no choice. There's nothing more damaging than to tell somebody they have no choice and no power and no control. That is the ultimate victim. If you can control someone's thinking, you control that person altogether. And if you can control a person and say, well, your choices don't matter, then there's no consequences. What difference does it make if somebody goes out and commits crime? They've been told that their choices don't matter. What do you expect? So when the Bible says that your thinking shapes your life, not vice versa, we have got to dig into that because we've got so much information flooding in all the time, trying to create victims out of everyone, that pretty soon our thinking begins to shift. This isn't, it's crazy, this isn't even a political sermon. I know that I've mentioned that word a lot, but I feel like instantly we take everything to politics. The minute we start talking about thinking, it goes, well, which side of the aisle is that on? It's neither. It's better than both. Have you ever heard the saying that you will love whatever you love? I didn't think you'd get a big response. I was folding laundry, yes. And there's something, moms, I'm going to talk to you this morning. I know that seems probably weird. It's actually being recorded on Father's Day. I don't know what time you're watching it. We might even watch it sometime like in December. I don't know. Has anybody ever had that moment where you're folding your kids' laundry and it's not long until you're like, oh my gosh, I remember when they used to wear this and they're so little and they're growing up so fast and pretty soon you're like, they're going to be out of the house pretty soon. Anybody ever have that moment where like, because you are serving, you are serving your family, and in serving your family, pretty soon you start to love them more, and pretty soon it becomes like this emotional thing of like, I'm going to be old. I'm closer than I used to be. It used to kill me when we would spend all winter up here. It would kill me. The days are so short. You know, it gets light at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon and dark at like 2:30 in the afternoon. And you have this moment where you look outside and you just watch the sun just go, and then it's down again. And so you're inside a lot. And so I would clean my saddles, or oil my saddles, and it was a bad move. And the reason it's a bad move is you get done oiling your saddle, what do you want to do? You see what I mean? Whatever you are serving, you begin to love more. That is the opposite of what we're told. We're supposed to just love the things that we feel good about. And what the Bible is going to show us here is that the choices that we make, the way that we choose to think, is going to have a giant effect on the way that we live our lives. Your thinking is not the harvest. If you're taking notes, and tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, we're doing the podcast, and I have loved those. I've loved the questions of people going, hey, I've been thinking about this. What about X, Y, and Z? We do live Q&A on Monday nights at 7. Write this down in your notes, is that your thinking is not the harvest. Your thinking is the soil. The way that you think, the things that you dwell on during your day, the way that you choose to focus, what you choose to focus on, that is not the result of what's happening in the world. The way that you think is the soil that will shape what happens in the world as it pertains to you. Daniel chapter 1. It's a lot of reading, and you guys know how much I love reading in front of people. Rio Vista, Texas, thank you for nothing. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. You guys used the word besieged this week. Invaded. They got invaded by the Babylonians. Hey, the Babylonians used to line the walls of their city with human skin. This is no small thing. They are being invaded by very bad people. And the Lord delivered the king of Judah into his hands, along with some of the articles of the temples of God. He then carried off the temple of his God in Babylonia and put in the treasure of the house of his God. So they invade, they go into the temple, they rob all the valuables, they take off, and then they turn their attention to the Israelites. Then the king ordered, I'm not even going to try that name, chief of his court officials to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility. So they pillaged the temple, and now they're looking, and they want to find the best of the leadership of Israel, and they're going to train them up. And let me explain to you why. The young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, qualified to serve in the king's palace. Turns out that was a tactical mistake, and I'm going to explain why. But for now, here's what I want you to hear. There's this invasion, and we've never been invaded. So don't try to pretend, and I won't either, that we're like, oh, yeah. We have no clue. We've never been invaded. We don't know what it's like to be invaded from a foreign country. I cannot imagine everything that's valuable to you, you don't own anymore. They do. Take the most valuable thing in your mind, the first thing that pops into your mind, and imagine someone else having that and you having no choice over the matter. That's an invasion. And they take the best of the kings, or the best of what Israel had to offer. He was to teach them the language and the literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. So they suffer an invasion, and they want to change the language, they want to change the reading, and they want to change the diet. They want you to speak different. They want you to read new material, and they want you to look the way that they look. That's what an invasion does, is it takes it and it changes it into the capturing country's culture. It's one of the things, actually, it's one of the things I love the most is when there's a clearly defined culture. Now listen, don't get after me, Central Oregon. I know I just talked about loving Powell, Butte, and we need to kind of bring things back up to where they were. I get it. I'm not talking, just bear with me. One of the things that I miss about living in Texas, I don't know if you're allowed to say this or not, and I know that we're being recorded, and I think my wife's eyes are getting big. Let me tell you. We're so white here. And I miss going to places and getting some of the black culture and the music and the input, and then going and then like we'd eat breakfast and we'd go down there to Juanita's and they don't speak English, and well, they speak English, I just don't want you to know it. And the food and the music, and there's just something about this human experience that I genuinely miss. When you go eat like Mexican food in Oregon, you walk in, they're like, hey, what's up? I used to go to calf opens, and I was one of like 1 or 2 white people in the entire facility. Just all my black friends, and they had nicknames, and they gave me nicknames, and I was like, I loved listening to the way that they would communicate and the way that they would talk and the music, and it was an experience. If you ever get a chance to experience things like that, I would encourage you to do it. But the thing is that we don't realize culture shapes so much of our lives. I'm not going to go too far down that road because I just feel like that I'm like walking down a road with social IEDs. But my point is, when you get invaded, the problem is things that you thought were just in concrete change. Because there's things that we think that we do that everyone does that we just do that are our culture. I heard a guy say one time, bear with me, the problem with the white culture is that we think we don't have one. We don't call it the way that white people do things. We just call it the way it's done. And so if we were to ever actually be invaded, the problem is we would be more offended than hurt. That's not how you do that. That's not how you cook that. That's not how that song goes. You're doing it wrong. That's our culture. You're doing it wrong. And so in this invasion, the problem is that they come in and they start to change all of it. Change the language, change the input, change the diet. To change everything, all you have to change is the input. If you're taking notes, if you want to completely change a culture, all you have to do is change the input. Because if you can change the input on an individual level, if you can change what someone is taking in, you will change what someone is putting out. I know that you guys are really lively and loud this morning, and it's very encouraging for me, but calm down a minute. Just settle down. I got to get this out. That if you can change what's going into someone in their thinking, in their processes, you will begin to change what their life produces. Babylon understood this. In 2020, the U.S. spent $242 billion with a B, $242 billion in advertising. 2019, it was $240 billion. In 2018, it was only $151 billion, and it just progressively goes down. What's happening is we're catching on. The world is catching on to what the Bible has been preaching forever, is that if you can capture someone's attention, you have control of that person. Whatever holds your attention owns you. So whatever you have to spend on advertising, it's worth it, because what you're doing is you are buying loyalty. You are buying obedience. How much do you have to spend? Doesn't matter. Spend whatever you have to spend. Because if you can own someone's attention, you own their time, their resources, their money, their thoughts, and their actions. How scary to think. How scary to think if that's true from an advertising standpoint. How often do we stop and consider what is taking control of our input? Selling data from our phones. You know that we didn't even know that was a big deal? Like when smartphones came out, we didn't even know that was a big deal. The tracking data of where you go, and like, I'm not trying to get creepy. I don't think it just, I honestly, if you're not being a dirtbag, then why do you care what people see on your phone anyway? But here to there. Have you ever thought to yourself like, man, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to buy a new tent. And you say it to somebody and it pops up, that kind of stuff. That's not on accident. They're trying to hold your attention. They want to hold your thinking. They want to be the focus of your thinking. I was kind of spacing out the other day, which I will do. I was just scrolling through Instagram, and I came across a pizza review, and they're doing this review on pizza, and they're in like Chicago or something, and he's talking about pizza, and it's just a stupid, mindless video, and pretty soon, here's what happens. Ready? I'm like, we've got pizza in the fridge. I didn't want pizza. I literally didn't even think I was hungry. Anybody have this moment? And you're like, I am hungry, but only for pizza. I didn't hear that. If something can hold your thinking, it holds your actions. Whatever you love, you will love. Whatever captures your thinking and captures your attention, wherever the stream of input is coming from, I can tell more about your output based on your input. Why is thinking important? Because that's the question. That's the number one question I've heard during this series. Well, what do you do? How do you affect your thinking? I get that thinking better. I get it, but how do you do that? I won't preach very many prescriptive sermons. Almost never. Usually I want to just, here's what I've said before. Remember those old commercials where they like put the pie out on the windowsill and somebody comes by and grabs it? That's genuinely been my approach. Probably to a detriment, but I'm kind of I'm an autonomous sort of a person. Like I like space and I get really claustrophobic and someone's like, will you mentor me? I'm like, no. Here's the information. You be a grown-up with it. Specifically this week, what I will do is this. This is a very prescriptive sermon. If you will do it like this, this is how it will work. I won't do that very often. I'm going to preach it this week. Your thinking is so important because your thinking is where your choices are made. Your decisions and your choices are made in moments of thinking. And once someone has made a choice and once someone has made a decision, it is very hard to talk that person out of that choice. Why? Because they don't think of it as being a choice. They just think of it as being truth. When was the last time you really stopped to think, I just made a choice? You don't dig that deep into it. You just go, this is what I'm going to do. Off we go. But that moment of this is what I'm going to do is made in moments of processing and thinking and focusing. And so much of your focus shapes the choices that you're going to make. I know I'm being repetitive. I have to be. It's important for where we're going. If someone could, so we're going back to invasion. If somebody could invade your thinking, here's the problem. You could be taken captive the same way the Israelites were. You could be a captive just as easy as the Israelites were. Oh, we hate that. I'm a free thinker. I'm a free person. I'll do what I want. We hate hearing this, but you're a result of where you focus. I remember bull riders used to say, you land where you look. I can land wherever I want. Nope, you're going to land where you look. You can choose where you look. Moment of confession here. I get so, see if this makes sense. And this is why we don't preach these live, because sometimes I get so distracted, like when we're recording, I'm like, I need to start over. If you'll track it, the pre-recorded sermons are actually better. Okay, anyway. This time of year, you see people loading up going rodeoing, and if you follow on social media, you'll like the tires are new, you got the bearings greased and ready to go, you got the oil changed in the truck, the horses are shod, everything's in shape, the saddles are, and you leave and you're gonna be gone, and you're gone for a few months. And listen, I'm 38 years old. Like if you were to ask me, do you really want to be gone all summer rodeoing? Yeah. No. No, it's not true, I don't. But as I'm scrolling through social media and I remember what that used to feel like. I remember Lacey used to pre-make a lot of meals and keep them in the freezer of the trailer, and like we were going to be gone. And when we were gone, here is where we would go. We'd leave Texas and we'd be gone for the summer. And I just remember the excitement and the work and the effort that you put into it. And I remember that feeling. And so the more I focus on it, it's not long until what? Well, I want to go. Because the more I look at something, the more it begins to shape my thinking. I don't want to go. But if I'm not careful, I can give it. Have you ever watched somebody do something wrong and tried to not say anything? I know some of you don't act like you have that ability. If you watch somebody and they're doing something wrong over and over and over again, something about us as people, we're like, my grandpa, his famous line, my grandpa was like, give me that. He just couldn't take it. Give me that. Just give it to me. Because if you focus on something long enough, I could walk by something I don't care about. I could literally walk by something I don't care about. And if I don't think about it, I could walk by it. I never think about it again. But the problem is, the more I watch, it doesn't matter what game I'm watching, any game at all. I can watch a game and pretty soon I'm like, just give me that. I don't care about fly fishing. But the more I do it, the more I want to do it. And the more I want to do it, honey, I know that seems like an expensive fishing pole, but. And meanwhile, the Facebook advertiser's like, yes, go ahead. Oh, here's a picture of a little trout you could have caught if you had the more expensive pole. I'm like, that's a good point. We all want freedom. But the problem is we don't guard our input. And if you don't guard your input, you are not free. You are a slave to whatever gets in through the filters. You are a slave to your own filters, and I'm free. I'm going to be free. I'm going to do whatever I want. And the problem is, we don't even understand where the freedom comes from. We don't understand the role that our filters play. I love fly fishing, but is it something I need to go spend money on? Honestly, no. If I go fishing and I don't catch a fish, it's not the end of the day unless I really stop to think about it. Well, what if We all want freedom, but do we guard the input that determines the output? Your thinking, where all the choices and all the decisions are made, is cast by the input. Whatever is coming in through I remember that song, Be Careful Little Ears What You Hear, Be Careful Little Eyes What You See. We sang that, and then the rest of that is, there's a Father up above and he's looking down in love, but really what he's looking down in is like, I saw what you saw. I hear what you're listening to. I'll never forget, maddest I've ever seen my mom was she came walking in one day and she got in my truck and started it, and I didn't know she was going to get my truck and start it, and my Tupac CD was in there. She comes walking in and she's holding my Tupac CD, and I'm like, two bad things have just happened. First of all, I'm in trouble, but man, that's a good CD. And I will never see it again. Our inputs. That's not a very good thing to admit. I'm not going to tell you which Tupac CD. Matthew chapter 13, Jesus says this. He told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed, and as he was scattering the seed, some of it fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Now, we've heard that, but the birds came and ate it up. It doesn't matter what God says to you. The problem is, if it doesn't get registered in our input, the birds come and take it away. James says, whatever you ask, a double-minded man should expect to receive nothing from God, not because God's like, you better not, but because we surrender it. God comes in and goes, have you thought about this? And we're not focusing on it. We're not giving God any amount of access to our inputs, to our eyes, to our ears, to our thoughts, to our thinking. And it says, why would you expect God to give you anything when you're not a part of the input? I'm curious how many hours we spend a week processing our mind, aligning our mind to who God is or who Jesus is or what the word is. And the truth is, the church is not very good at guarding our input. And here's what's scary. Verse 8, if you skip ahead, verse 8 says, still other seeds fell on good soil where it produced a crop 100 or 60 or 30 times what was sown. It produced a crop thousands of times over from one little seed. So when the bird stole the seed, where did the harvest go? Somewhere else. I think sometimes we get so frustrated because our life doesn't look the way that we want it to look. And the problem is we keep surrendering the things that are the most fertile. Young people, you've got a lot of life in front of you, this exponential growth process where like if you're gonna see exponential growth in your life, the rule of exponential growth, do your own research. It doesn't get big quickly. It stays small for a long time, but the thing is once it's faithful for a long time, long-term faithfulness in the same direction, pretty soon it starts to take off and all of a sudden your life is producing these crops and these harvests. Why? Because you guarded what came into the soil. Genesis chapter 4 says this. Chapter 4, verse 8. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out in the field. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. There's a thought that maybe Cain didn't understand what death was, and that Cain was overwhelmed with rage for Abel, but he kills his brother. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? He said, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? The argument is the rest of the Bible is answering that question. The rest of the Bible answers the question, am I my brother's keeper? Am I responsible for you? Is Powell Butte responsible for the online campus? Is the online campus responsible for contributing to what goes on in Powell Butte? Are we responsible for each other? And the rest of the Bible is God's answer that says you are absolutely responsible for each other. And here's how he says it. The Lord said, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. If you go back and you research what that is in the original Greek, here's what's so interesting, is it says your brother's bloods. What's he saying? That life of Abel was a seed, and it was a lineage, and it was a harvest, and it was growth. And there's so many generations that were put to death when you killed your brother. The bloods of Abel cry out to me from the ground. This goes both directions. I think sometimes we get so locked on what's happening on our phone or what we're listening to, and we're creating a generation of struggles and health issues for the people that need us to be okay. This crop that God wants to produce in our life gets stolen because we're being invaded. Every single day, people are spending money to capture your thoughts. You're under attack. I'm under attack. We're under. Is that a big scary thing? Only if we're not aware of it. There are generations of lives stored up in your thinking. When the Bible said an eye for an eye, this is one of the most confusing verses in the Bible. And the Bible says an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. That was actually a justice to say stop overdoing the revenge. Because there was these people that if you killed one of their family members, they would kill 100 of yours. And then if you killed 100 of mine, I'm going to kill 1,000. See how it starts to go? And the Bible's like, stop, there's got to be a justice. A life has got to be worth a life. I'm in the middle of a book right now. Dennis Prager says that if one person were to kill 1 million people, we'd say, yeah, that person needs to be put to death. Okay, what if you only killed 100? Well, okay. What about one for one? The one for one, what the Bible is trying to communicate is that your life, there are generations stored up within your bones. Your life is infinitely valuable. If I took a life, I'm not just taking one life, I'm taking generations of lives to come. We don't think of ourselves as being valuable. We don't think of our input as being worth protecting. But the Bible is saying you are infinitely more valuable than you understand if you could guard your input. Why do we come to church? Because we get good input. But I have no control over whether or not it gets in. For all I know, you walk out of this room, the bird's still, and it was like you were never here. You have an accountability. You have a responsibility for what you're going to do with it. I feel a responsibility to create an opportunity where you can accept the idea. But the truth is, I can't live your life. You've got generations stored up inside your bones, and it is up to you to see that brought to the surface. And it will only be brought to the surface by your thinking. I want to real quick make a distinction. You don't always get to control your thoughts. You always get to control your thinking. You ever had that moment where you're laying in bed and you're almost asleep and out of nowhere you're like, what? Sometimes thoughts just get shot across the bow. You're like, no. I'm not going to punch them in the face. No, I'm not. Daniel, let's go back to Daniel. It says, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself. What did Daniel say? I don't want to surrender my input. His country had been invaded. Daniel said, you can overtake my country, but you can't have me. Kill me if you must. You're not getting in. It wasn't about a diet. It was about a refusal to surrender the inputs. Now, God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel, but the official told Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord the king who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would have my head. He said, wait a minute, I'm concerned that your output wouldn't keep up based on your input. The Babylonians are saying, we're trying to shape your output by determining your. Then Daniel said to the guard, Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed and tested them for 10 days. He said, see if, because of my input, you're not satisfied with my output. As a pastor, this is the verse right here. Why do we give firewood away? Listen, I've done a horrible job. I stand here guilty of not doing a good job of communicating what the 1017 Project is doing this month. Do you know that this month we're giving away, ready for this? 40,000 pounds of hamburger. You want to do the math on that? 40,000 pounds, 160,000 meals of protein that can be given with everything else in the food bank statewide in the state of Oregon. We get so busy, we don't talk about it. That's what I'm saying. We've been so busy working on everything else that sometimes I feel a responsibility about, oh yeah, we are doing something really amazing. The reason that our output looks the way that it looks is because our heart is to have the proper input. I want our church to say what we say, but I want us to do what we say. I want our input, what comes through this microphone, to land and to take effect so that the people who call Shiloh home go, my life looks different than it used to. But the problem is, that's on you to decide, does it get in or not? At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate at the royal food. Now, it's giving us a dietary example, because if a dietary example, there's a physical manifestation, but this was not a dietary decision, was it? It was a spiritual decision that Daniel said, I'm not surrendering my input. I'm not going to give up what comes in my eyes, what comes in my ears, or what comes out of my mouth. I don't want to surrender to the new culture. I don't want to say the things I'm hearing people say. I don't want to listen to the things I'm hearing other people listen to. I don't want to accept the negativity. I don't want to get lost in the war of comparison. I wish social media would just call itself what it is. A comparison and happiness machine. Because if you can keep people unhappy people are very motivated. If you'd have caught a fish, you'd been happier. You're right. I'll buy the fishing pole. Before there was ever a lion's den, because later, remember, Daniel's going to go into the lion's den. There's 15 sermons left, and I'm out of time, and I'm out of notes. I need to be done, but before there was ever a lion's den, Daniel knew that his input mattered. That what came into his spirit and what he dwelt on would shape the person he became. Daniel was a stronghold. And what I mean by a stronghold is a place where the enemy can hide unobserved. Daniel was saying, I'm not giving up. The majority of Israel had been invaded, and the majority of Israel was changing cultures. And Daniel said, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to surrender what I believe to be true. I'm not going to surrender. A stronghold in the Bible was a place like up in the mountains where the enemy could hide and you couldn't see him. And Daniel goes, okay, sounds good. I'm not with you. Someone who wouldn't surrender to the culture around him. You know why the church struggles with the outside culture? Because we don't guard our inputs. How many hours a week do we spend reading the Bible or focusing on it? And now you're like, oh, here we go. Is it a guilt trip? Absolutely. If we were to honestly answer this question, how much time do we spend in the Word? And you go, oh, I can't read the Bible. Find a podcast, find a sermon, find something, because the problem is, it's not like your inputs are ever turned off. So if you're not forcibly making yourself consider things that are true, considering things that are just, there's a verse we're getting to. But the problem is, if you just go neutral, it's not like the world goes, okay, let's be fair. We're going to skip ahead 5 chapters to Daniel chapter 6. It says, now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, what was the decree? You weren't allowed to worship. Because that's where it starts, isn't it? It's just a little adjustment. It's just a diet. It's not a big deal. It's just a little compromise. Here we are 5 chapters later, and they're like, I feel like sometimes the punishments were written by like the children of the country. They're like, all right, and if somebody doesn't follow the decree, what do we do? And they're like, do we have any lions? And they're like, yeah, we do. Do you have like a pen for him? You think of what I'm thinking? I mean, you think of it in terms of that, like, And if you don't do it, you're going to be thrown into a lion's den. That is the 3-year-old punishment. When the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times every day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Daniel was somebody who understood the value of his inputs. What was coming in was going to shape what was going out. In his thinking, it was shaped in his decisions and his output. It's all there. The proof is all there. And the problem is we turn off to it. Why does church matter? Because it helps to nourish our input. Why is worship important? We're working through like our worship projection. And the problem that I have is, dadgummit, we sit here and we're like, is this over yet? Because we don't value the role that the input plays in our life. And because, you ready for this? Because there's no worship coming in during the week, there's no worship coming out on a Sunday. Because we're selfish on a Tuesday, we get selfish on a Sunday. Why do we do it this way? I don't like it this way. Whatever is in is what comes out. We get squeezed, we get pressure, and it's like, nah. Daniel said, my inputs matter because whether I'm eaten by a lion, as elementary as that sounds or not, I'm not going to surrender my inputs because what comes in will shape who I am. And I have to live with myself when I go to bed at night. I can't remember the numbers. I'm going to say a number, and I don't quote me on it. It could be wrong, but it's high. That the U.S. consumes like 85% of the world's antidepressants. Duh. We consume everything. Why wouldn't we consume antidepressants? We're depressed. Why? Because we don't like the way that we think. Why? Because we don't got our inputs. Why? Because we don't think that matters. You guys know what Biden did today? Trump would have never allowed this. We've become so religious about everything except the things that matter. Guarding the inputs. This is this rare prescriptive moment. Philippians 4:8 says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true. Do we forget that sometimes in the world there are things that are true? Because when you say something's true, they're like, true according to who? We've lost our concept of truth. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. What's it saying? How much of your week is spent on things that are true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, or praiseworthy? If you feel guilty, good. We all should. It's a reminder of we have got to stop what we're doing. We're turning into crazy people. The church is turning into crazy people that don't produce love. We don't produce mercy. We don't produce better in our communities. We are as bad as anybody else. Why? Because we don't guard our input. So the enemy's like, I don't care what you say you believe. Don't care. Don't care. Go to church, good for you. Call yourself a Christian? Great. I don't care. I'm not concerned about what you're saying that's coming out. If I can have control of what's going in, I own you. Not your church, you. You with the first name, you with the middle name, you with the last name, you with the driver's license, you with an identity. You don't have that anymore if you don't guard your input. There was a time where God was about to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, Old Testament stuff, look it up. But who was it? Was it Lot? That said, if I can find Lot, Pastor Jordan's having to ask people from, yeah, it's Lot. I knew that for sure. He goes, I'm going to destroy. He's like, what are you talking about? No, I can't. You can't destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. That's like my hometown. They have the best breakfast burritos. And he said, if you can find 50 people, if I can find 50 people, will you spare Sodom and Gomorrah? God goes, yeah, you bet. Okay, so he comes back and he's like, all right, 40. God's like, okay. If I can, goes out in the city, comes back, he's like, all right, God, listen. If I can find 30 strongholds, Places where the enemy is not invaded, not the city, because the city is lost, but an individual, somebody who has protected his inputs, somebody that the enemy has not got. Find 30. And God's like, okay. He goes all the way down until finally Lot's like, 10? The mercy of God, God says, if you can find someone who has not been saturated, I can do amazing things through that one person. If this whole church listens to this sermon and everybody goes, yeah, whatever, and one person, one young person goes, what kind of harvest could that seed have created in my life? What sort of opportunities could come to life and produce a harvest, and they latch onto this and go, I'm going to guard my input. I'm not saying that every day you need to just go stare at your Bible and you're like, I don't get it. It would be better than what you're doing, but I'm saying, argh. I'm saying that you give your spirit a fighting chance to go, but who is Jesus? Whatever is praiseworthy, whatever is excellent, whatever is noble, that you give yourself a fighting chance. God goes, I can do something with that. The story goes that the lions didn't eat Daniel. Real quick. Joe was at a wrestling gym in Arizona, and they'd said the next week that they were going to let the high schoolers come in, and they were going to teach them some moves, and it was going to be rough. Just, buckle up. He told the moms he brought Starbucks cards so they could all leave the gym during this, but I guess it was going to be rough. And I asked Jed, I go, are you excited? He goes, I'm just going to pray. It's like Daniel the lion's den. And I go, what are you talking about? He goes, I'm just going to pray the lions aren't hungry when I get there. The king comes out, and he sees that Daniel hasn't been consumed, and what happened? Because of one stronghold, because of one hidden place that guarded its input and kept God at the center of what was coming in, guarding the filters, it says that the king had a conversion and everything changed. Everything changed because somebody who was willing to guard the inputs. What we're doing here matters because what you're doing right now is you're stopping and you're giving yourself a fighting chance. You're going, wait a minute. I'm lost. I'm producing. Have you ever tried to quit something? This is it. I promise this is it. Have you ever got mad at yourself? I'm like, that's it. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not going to eat donuts for breakfast every single morning. That's it. Honey, you're right. And you can't figure out why it's so hard. And yet, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you're scrolling and your phone knows what you want for breakfast. And it's like chocolate, sugar-coated, glazed. What are you doing? You're losing the battle the day before. And you can't figure out why the inputs won't change because you've never guarded the inputs. You've never guarded what's coming in. Everybody with horses, back me up on this. We've all done it. You turn the water on, you're like, I'll be back in 5 minutes, I won't forget. Something happens. You come back and the tank is cleaner than if you took a scrub brush to it. Why? Because a little bit of constant input changes everything. Everything has changed because of a flow, an input. You can scrub your life, and why can't I change, and why can't I change? And if you never address what's coming in through the filters, you will never experience the life that God's got for you. The birds keep grabbing it and taking off, and your inputs are lost. Let's pray. Lord, this is absolutely prescriptive. I am telling everybody what to do. I'm not even apologizing for it. But God, let us be people who address our inputs. The time that we spent just scrolling through our phone and looking through advertising and watching TV and the whole time. God, I believe this. I believe that every single moment of every single day, you are speaking to us. Every day. And that feels so shocking because your voice has to compete with the noise of the world. God, give us Daniel's resolve that says, I'm not going to surrender my inputs. Maybe I can't change my culture yet. Maybe I can't change the world yet, but I'm not going to give up what you have for me by surrendering my inputs. God, let us get creative. Let us get creative about how we guard our inputs, whether it's sermons, whether it's worship, whatever the case may be. It doesn't matter what the case may be, but God, give us a heart of worship so that when we come in Sunday, what we are producing in the world on a Sunday and what we're producing in the world on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at our jobs and our families, God, that we begin to produce something that is clean and pure and righteous and beneficial to the world. Like a breath of fresh air, God, change our smell. By changing what we put into our spirits, by changing our inputs, by guarding our inputs, God, change the way that we think so that we can change the way that we live. Pray in Jesus' name, amen.